Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. It's our first time, and we are hoping for a fruitful discussion also. Um, Citizens in Jamaica, citizens generally have a vested interest with respect to how the public entities meet their mandates, given the impact on their lives. And so good governance is important, is vital to creating value as it relates to government entities or any entity at all, you name it. So governance structures in Jamaica continue to evolve over the years. And within the public sector, they will vary. The governance structure will vary based on the type of organization. So when Kamla asked us to come and share on the phenomena, we call it, of executive agencies, we were like, yes, that's a good one. Because most of the discussions have been focusing on the public bodies per se, and not necessarily the executive agencies. So we really appreciate the interest and look forward to this discussion. But I would like to highlight another group of organizations within the structure of government. As I said, the public bodies. So within the executive arm of the government, there is the civil service or the central government, which consists of ministries, departments, and executive agencies. Now, outside of the executive agencies, we have what are known as the public bodies. And they have an overarching legislation. I was excited to hear a lot of talk about the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act. It's the overarching legislation for public bodies, and we always like to say it reigns supreme. So it's supreme to the enabling laws of the various public bodies. The public bodies are defined within that act to be statutory organizations or government companies. And by statutory bodies, those statutory bodies have body corporate status. And by body corporate status, I mean they're separate legal entities with their own persona. And they can sue, they can be sued in their own name, they can own properties. They're basically a person. So they perform various functions, whether quasi-judicial, whether regulatory, administrative, or public bodies are undertaking various government functions. And there are, of course, others that are involved in commercial activities, and in some jurisdictions, they call them state-owned enterprises. So when we engage stakeholders, we really tend to like to clarify the differences between executive agencies and public bodies. And you may ask why. You see, both public bodies and executive agencies were created to deliver certain government services with more efficiency and with more effectiveness. And so persons often don't know the difference. However, public bodies have more operational latitude than the EAs. And the EA's functions are closer aligned to the center. Say, for instance, the customs functions, registrar functions, the road work functions, the passport functions, we want to keep those closer to the center. As it relates to public bodies, they were created, of course, giving consideration to the fact that we wanted to compete for more competent persons within the government sector. So there are other differences, mainly relating to the governance structure for both. They have different governing legislation. There, as I said before, the public bodies have body corporate status. The executive agencies do not. The executive agencies have advisory boards, while the public bodies have management board with decision-making authority. Both are required to have audit committees, but the way the audit committees are appointed may vary. So with that clarified, I'm going to hand over to Michael to take you through the phenomena of the executive agencies in Jamaica.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm just gonna give a brief overview of the executive agency model in Jamaica. I'll start by indicating what are executive agencies. They are semi-autonomous entities designated as such by the minister responsible for public service. They have delegated authority for human resources and finances. However, they still remain a part of central government, as Mrs. James had indicated before. Reasons for establishing. They were established due to the need identified for improvement in the delivery of service in particular government entities. For example, in the passport sector and in the registrar sector. Following reviews of the various options available, becoming a public body, the decision was made to adopt the EA model. This was determined after reviews of models to deliver government service in a number of jurisdictions. The British model was examined, which was examined indicated improvements in service delivery by entities that had transitioned to executive agencies. Added to that, the government decided that because of the type of services that these entities were required to deliver, that it would not be in the public interest for the entities to operate exclusively from central government. We're going to have a brief look at the legal framework governing the executive agencies. Executive agencies are governed by the Executive Agencies Act of 2002 and the regulations 2011. And the fact that they're still a part of central government, they're required to comply with the laws that govern the public sector for the most part. There are some areas of the law governing the public sector, specifically the Financial Administration and Audit Act, that do not apply to EAs. For example, government entities are required to surrender all excess cash being held at its bank account to the consolidated fund at the end of the financial year, while the executive agency is not required to do so. They are, however, are required to remit 50% of their net surplus to the consolidated fund at the end of the year. The amount that is retained by them, which is their 50%, is to be used for capital expenditure. Now we look at the reporting arrangements. Executive agencies, they are headed by a chief executive officer. This CEO is appointed by the Governor General on the recommendation of the Public Services Commission. The CEO reports direct to the portfolio minister with responsibility for the agency and not to a board. The Executive Agencies Act requires the portfolio ministry's permanent secretary to monitor the performance of the CEO on behalf of the portfolio minister. The role of the advisory board. We'll look at the advisory board here now. The Executive Agencies Act requires that an advisory board should be appointed. The advisory board operates in an advisory capacity only, advising the CEO on strategic and business planning matters. The CEO, however, is not bound to accept the recommendations of the advisory board. The advisory board is appointed by the portfolio minister on the recommendation of the CEO. Requirements for the board composition are that it must include someone with legal and someone with financial experience, as well as other matters that the CEO considers appropriate for the appointment. It must emphasize, however, that the CEO is not accountable to the advisory board, but to the portfolio minister. The CEO is responsible for the stewardship and accountability of the executive agency. Our executive agency achieving their objectives? Based on evidence so far, the model has worked. For example, prior to becoming executive agencies, the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, which was formerly Passport Office, as well as the Registrar General Department, responsible for registration of births, deaths, marriages, and so forth, were seen by the general public to be operating in a very inefficient manner, resulting in lengthy wait times for the processing and delivery of documents applied for. These delays facilitated corrupt practices in the system. After becoming executive agencies, the wait time for receiving documents was considerably reduced with improved streamlining of the processes. With the streamlining of the processes and improvement in the delivery, new services were also introduced, such as same-day delivery, next-day delivery, and delivery of documents applied for. Although considerable improvements in service delivery have been achieved, the operation of the model is not perfect. And following review of the model, recommendations are made for improvements. For example, recommendations are made for the development of policy guidelines to supplement and improve the existing statutory provisions for the selection, accountability, and operational advisory boards. Recommendations were also made for improvements in the methodology for determining fees and charges to facilitate the timely review, development, and amendments of fee structures. Additionally, when this review was being conducted, the consultants spoke to various stakeholders, including the permanent secretaries and the CEOs. And one of the concerns that the permanent secretaries had and they expressed was a dissatisfaction with the fact that although CEOs are responsible for the operations and results of the agency, when CEOs issues arise, the permanent secretaries are required to give account to the Jamaican people through the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. The CEOs indicate that although they are given delegated authority for HR matters, for them to implement a post or employ someone in a post that has been vacant for more than a year, they have to seek approval from the Ministry of Finance. And this process is said to be time consuming and does allow the agency to recruit needed staff in a timely manner, and as such, the operations at times are adversely affected. All right. So that is not just the overview of the EA model in Jamaica. Any questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for your answer. Can I ask one question, please? I'm not sure that I caught it. The executive agencies, are they funded by the consolidated fund, or are they required to raise their own funding?
They have the ability to raise their own funding if depending on the services that they offer. They are, for the most part, a lot of them are funded from the consult fund. We have the agencies are split into, we have 12 agencies in Jamaica, 12 EAs, and they are split into what we call financial models. Some models are, well, they all are required to earn the fees except what we call a model agency, which are required to earn less than 40% of their fees, of their expenditure from fees. Those agencies are, for the most part, funded from the consult fund. We have another one called the model agency, which is required to earn between 40 and 90% of their expenditure from fees. The excess that they don't earn, they will get from the consult fund. We have another model, which is the model C, which is supposed to earn, practically 100%, 9% or more of their expenditure from fees. If they have a shortfall, they are required to seek funding via loan from the government, from the Accounting General's Department. That's how they are funded.
Right. So we can all jump in with questions when we're ready. Can I ask, I noticed that with your executive agencies model, the board serves in an advisory capacity, but what I thought was interesting is that the CEO is not bound to take the advice of the board. That certainly is a departure from anything that I'm familiar with, and certainly anything that operates here in Barbados. I mean, even our legislation for SOEs in Barbados, because we haven't gone to where you've got. We haven't made those distinctions. We just have no commercial SOEs and non-commercial SOEs, and this is a new nomenclature since 2019. But I found that was very interesting, and I wanted to find out from you, how has that been working? Has it worked to the advantage of the agency and by extension the people, or do you think that there is some room for maybe a tweaking?
Well, based on experiences so far, what we have seen is that the model that exists in terms of the management and reporting arrangement has worked for Jamaica. What we have experienced, however, is sometimes the board, as far as the board comes in, not knowing or recognizing their role, and they come in with the mindset of a normal board, because most of these people who come in as well are board members in other entities, and that sometimes cause a little bit of conflict. Which sometimes we here are called to actually, perform sessions with them to kind of advise them of the role that they're supposed to play. So I just said at the end of the day, to answer the question, it does not adversely affect the performance of the agency. It seems to work for the most part.
And just to add, when Michael said that they come in from different entities, some of these persons come from boards of public bodies, and the setup for the public body board is similar to what you may be familiar with.
Yes.
Where
yes.
the board is a management board, they're able to make decisions. So the board has strategic oversight, whereas the CEO by any name called would have the responsibility for the day-to-day management. So yes, this is a variation from the norm, but as Michael said, it is working, and it's a process, a continual process of review as it relates to how these entities work.
Okay, I have two questions in the chat. The first question: what are some of the considerations in deciding whether a body receives executive agency status, and does the PBMA apply to executive agencies? Who's going to take that?
To answer the last part, Michael will take the first part. But to answer the last part, the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act applies strictly to public bodies. And as defined, as I mentioned earlier, these are either statutory bodies with body corporate status or government companies which would have been established under the Companies Act. The executive agencies, they have their own legislation, which is called the Executive Agencies Act. So they both set of organizations have their own set of legislation. The PBMA and its respective regulations, the Executive Agencies Act and its respective their respective regulations. Over to you, Michael.
Upon realizing or deciding that there are performance issues with the particular entity, the portfolio ministry then makes a decision to, okay, we need to find a way to better deliver services to the public with these particular entities. So what they do, they commission what's called a prior option review, where they look at the various options that they can look to change, including considering going a public body. The decision for these entities to go here was taken after this review was done, where they looked at the options and the various outcomes that they're requiring, and they deemed that this model for these entities would be most suited based on the review that they had commissioned done. And as a result, the decision is taken to go that route, and they go through a process by what we call creating, after the decision is made, schema management that determines the way forward in establishing. The schema management consists of a modernization plan, business and financing plan, a performance agreement that is signed at the beginning with a CEO, because a CEO, bringing a CEO at the same time, the decision is made to drive the process to get everything done. And also it includes a framework document that is done up, that indicates the whole role and relationship between the CEO and all the various stakeholders, the Cabinet Office, the Ministry of Finance, the ministry in the form of the Minister and the Permanent Secretary and so forth. All that's developed, and that's what drives the agency forward in its creation.
So
Okay.
if it is that there are certain government functions that need to be performed, and as Michael had said earlier, if these functions are being stymied somewhat because of maybe the bureaucracy, and I'll give you some examples. Say, for instance, the whole matter of services related to death and birth registration. These are services which the public usually get, from the government. And so if it is that having it very close to the center is resulting in inefficiencies, the decision may be made to have it a little further from the center so that they can function efficiently. So the passport and immigration agency, right? So these are services that the public really demand, but could be done more efficiently, just a little bit away from the center. So those are factors that, would be considered.
Okay, thank you. Simone, did we answer your question? Do you have anything else you want to add?
Sure. Thank you very much for that, Una. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you very much. Actually, I just had another follow-up question, if you don't mind. I wondered, I understand that the executive agencies are governed under discrete legislation, under the Executive Agencies Act. And I wondered, I know you had made a comment earlier, Cheryl, about how it's been working so far. I wanted to know whether that there's a review, any considerations around a review of the act, as this process, as the system evolves and we see how the EAs actually function. Is there any review being contemplated, or is everything perfect?
Well, coming out of the EA review that I mentioned that was conducted some time ago, there were some sections of the act that they recommended that for changes to remain, especially for the regulations as well. In one instance, the section of the regulation that did not align with the act. So the recommendation made for alignment to be made. There are recommendations as well for the role of the advisory board to be more codified in the act and regulations. That's the recommendation as well, and also a recommendation for the role of the permanent secretary in its supervision and guidance of the EA to be more defined in the act. Those are some of the things that has come out for recommendation for changes to the regulations.
Okay, thanks a lot. And just to follow up, I mean, we had spoken earlier on, all the work that the government has done in terms of the PBMA for the statutory bodies, the public bodies, to put in all these safeguards and guidelines around the appointments of directors. I understand that this is an advisory board, but I wondered, since you're now doing this review, is this something that you're also considering putting in some of, similar types of regulations or guardrails around how directors of EA advisory boards are appointed? Thanks.
One thing I can certainly say, Simone, that when we were looking at the whole, when we were involved in the whole process, the Parliament had suggested that something similar be put in place for the EA. So it's not far-fetched. The process has not yet begun. It's just a discussion point. But one thing we can say is that those in the Parliament, having been sold on the whole matter of the regulations for the public bodies, are seeking, I'm sure they will be seeking to bring this over and make something like that applicable to the executive agencies. But right now, what they can do is look at the principles. but there is nothing concrete in place for them now.
All
Thank you
right.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Simone. I have a quick question too. In terms of, I noticed when you were doing your presentation, Michael, you alluded to the fact that the CEO doesn't have to take the advice of the board and the CEO reports directly to the minister. If I got that right. So I just wanted to find out from you, what role does the minister play in the entire process? And I'm asking that because I'm thinking of my own situation here in Barbados, where we have the public bodies type of arrangement, and where in the legislation governing these entities, they actually speak to what the minister can and cannot do. So I'm just trying to find out in the whole governance of the these entities, what role does the minister play?
Well, the minister is primarily responsible for the strategic direction that the agency has. In doing the corporate operating plans and so forth, the minister, takes a hand in it, primarily to the permanent secretary, in developing what is required from the agency and by extension the CEO within any given legal time frame, whether a year, 2, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. And as we said before, the minister responsibility has overall responsibility for the performance of the particular DA. And this also is indicated in the Constitution, you know. It's Constitution dictates this as well, and the Constitution also indicates that the permanent secretary is supposed to monitor to advise the performance of the entities, the departments under the particular portfolio ministry. So you know, basically the act and the regulations is basically set out in a way to also reflect what is required by overarching the piece of legislation or regulation which is the Constitution.
Do you find that the entity is able to exercise some level of autonomy? And I'm asking that because I'm thinking ministers appoint boards and then sometimes do direct the boards. So I'm trying to find out with your model, what sort of autonomy does these agencies have?
Okay, I'm gonna give you some practical experiences here now. As indicated before, the advisory boards are just that, advisory.
Mm-hmm.
The advisory capacity, and they are there to advise the CEO, not to the minister, the CEO.
Yes.
On strategic and planning matters. We have had issue at times where a minister will decide that he's not going to appoint a board because of that very same reason. Because ERC has indicated that based on the law, it's not their board. They'll report to them. So they don't see the reason for them to have any sort of urgency in getting a board, because as far as based on the law, is the CEO's board. And we have seen that, and well, it has happened. And sometimes I would say the board will come in, advisory board, thinking that they are coming in basically management capacity to manage the entity, and which they are not. And that's why I said sometimes it causes a little friction between them and the CEO. And as I said, then we have sometimes they call in to basically set the ship straight.
All that is different from what I'm familiar with, because we do more of the public bodies type of model. And it'll be interesting. It's interesting to hear from you, because we should learn from each other. And if you have a model that is working, we would like to think that we can borrow some of your ideas and so on. I'd love to see how we can implement them here to improve our own efficiencies here in Barbados. So I was just trying to find out from you because I work for a commercial SOE. So as you're speaking, you know, I'm thinking my thoughts are running and I'm looking to see, well, okay, maybe these are some of the ideas that we can suggest that maybe they look at your model and look to see what can be borrowed if we can in terms of helping to build out our systems, our structures, our governance structures, and improve the efficiencies because we deliver services to the public as well. And we want to make sure that we you know, we can meet the demands and we can improve our efficiencies. On the public body side of the Jamaican experience, how has the governance issues worked, and or where are you in terms of assessing where you go in the future?
As it relates to the public bodies, we have a strong governance system. I'll
Excellent.
start with that. We do
Very
have a
good.
strong governance system. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we've come a long way, a long way. And as a matter of fact, the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act is one of the first, well, it is the first act of its kind within this hemisphere. As a matter of fact, it predated Sarbanes-Oxley. And coming out of the PBMA, we also have a corporate governance framework because the idea was not to clutter the act. So we have a corporate governance framework that provides additional guidance to the public bodies in Jamaica. And coming out of the corporate governance framework, we've had several tools, as just recently, we looked at a code of ethics. So we have guidelines for corporate secretaries. We have, as Simone had said earlier, the regulations that guide the nomination, selection, and appointment for support. However, well, I need to just say something because we probably should have said it earlier, that this piece of legislation is relatively new. It was just passed, it was just gazetted in March, and it's supposed to come into full effect by January. And so we've not had any way and means to assess it because it's not fully implemented. Yes, we do have our challenges, and every now and again we hear of a scandal or two. However, those are, let me rhyme, few. So, right, relative to the fact that we have 146 public bodies, we are probably aware of a few bad apples. And what it does is facilitates greater review for us. And we continue to treat with the governance for our public bodies, but we do have quite a number of tools, framework, and I'm going to repeat something that Simone said earlier, because you can have all of this, but if you don't have the will, if there is not the will, all of this may be to naught if there is not the will. We also continue to work with the various sectors. The private sector organization of Jamaica is one such, academia, in developing these policies. And I'll tell you, the PSOJ, Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, keeps us on our feet. And so, and the media, they keep us on our feet. The citizens, they keep us on our feet. And so we have to continue to look at what needs to be strengthened. As a matter of fact, currently we are reviewing the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, owing to some of the gaps that we have seen. And we just continue to learn.
Well, that is very...
Maybe you can take something.
Yes, I'm liking what I'm hearing. I like the idea that you have a strong, robust system. It is very important. And who knows, maybe we can borrow from you. I'm going to invite Kamla, who has a question.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Una. I've actually, I was just burning to get in all the while, to be honest, because as Cheryl and they said, when I contacted her, I was speaking with so much passion about the executive agencies, and that is because I was introduced to it through a report by Dr. Patricia Holness, who had done a consultancy for the civil registry in Trinidad and Tobago. And when I went to work at Ministry of Legal Affairs, and I was invited to serve as the transformation manager for the Registrar General's department, I took Dr. Holness's report off the shelf, dusted it, and began to implement. And it was on the basis of that that we saw so many changes, including our same-day service for the delivery of the computer-generated birth certificates. So I went and did some research to find out who is Dr. Patricia Holness, and to have written such an amazing report for us. And a lot of the recommendations that she had included spoke to being able to find ways to generate revenue to come back into the department. So that was something that I was also very interested in hearing you speak to today, that the executive agency structure itself is set up that way. Now, before I come to you, I just wanted to share. So in Trinidad and Tobago, following her work, and I'm not sure where the genesis of the idea may have come from as well, but our initial Vision 2020 document, which was supposed to have guided as a roadmap for Trinidad and Tobago over a period of time, that spoke to setting up executive agencies in some of the key government agencies as well, similar to what you have there. That speaks to where there needs to be efficiency and great demand on the part of the population and that kind of thing. So, but it never took off. And I'm not sure what might have accounted for it. I mean, it's easy to say political will, but sometimes there may be more. So I wanted to ask you, Cheryl and Michael, I'm not sure if you would be able to speak to it much, but was the genesis of the executive agencies for you? Was that a recommendation that came through the IMF while you were doing your whole restructuring exercise and rationalization for your public service? And what were some of the challenges you would have encountered? Because you two would have been moving from, this very centralized type bureaucratic public service into setting up these bodies that are meant to be more efficient.
Initially, I am not too sure of what drove decision making to really look at this this model. In and of itself, I can say that at the time the options were looked at, the consultant was engaged, or a bigger auditing firm was engaged to lead the whole consultancy. And coming out of that, they made the recommendation for the EA model to be adopted. Set out all terms of reference, everything was set out by them, and the decision was then taken by the government that we are going to pursue this avenue. The amount of agencies that was slated to be on stream at this particular point in time is nowhere achieved, because at the time it was estimated that over 100 entities would have eventually gone that route. But for some reason, the whole process has stalled with the 12 entities, has not moved further. Well, and we have heard that some of the ministries are currently looking at some of their departments that they oversee to see if going this route would be the best for them going forward in terms of improving their level of service delivery.
Okay, so and another question, which I wanted some clarity to. How different is the structure in terms of the way the rules are? Is it that the head of your executive agency, your CEO, can function as a CEO in the private sector, in that they are able to recruit the staff that they need, they're able to terminate staff who are not functioning well, you know, which is one of the issues we have in the general public service. Is that part of that structure?
Well, they are able to recruit staff. As I said before, they had that dedicated authority for HR. But the recruiting the staff, they are a little bit restricted in terms of the process, in that they still have to activate posts, and to get posts established, they still have to come to the Minister of Finance to have that done. And also sometimes it takes a little time. And as I said before, it takes away from the ability at times to deliver the services in a timely manner. You understand? Another thing, they have the authority to also fire, but they have to do so within the context of the civil service regulations. All right, they're supposed to set by HR manual, which was the detail, the whole disciplinary process and so forth. But all the matters in it has to basically mirror what the regulations indicate. Because we have even had a case before where somebody, I mean, the rules as per laid out in the HR manual was followed. The person was dismissed. The person challenged it, went to court, and you know, because the procedure that was set up in the HR manual did not mirror civil service regulations, the person won the case and had to be reinstated. You know, so to finish off, yes, they have the power to hire and fire, but they do that within the context of the rules that go in civil service.
Okay, interesting again. So you kind of have like, I'm beginning to think that maybe the EAs are kind of like a hybrid. They're
Yes.
not, yes, they're not at one extreme, they're not, so okay, I'm understanding better now how the EAs function.
The
Very
term,
interesting.
I think the term they use is semi-autonomous.
Yes, semi-autonomous.
Right.
I'm glad you raised the whole point of recruitment, because I'm thinking of boards. I remember that we don't have EAs, so I'm more familiar with the traditional type of state-owned statutory board, and I'm also thinking of how recruiting is done. So I am very interested to hear that with the EAs, they have some leeway, but they might be a lot hampered by having to go the route of following the civil service route. But for your public bodies now, is it similar, or is it a case where the minister can say, for instance, well, I want this person hired, and the person comes in and the person is hired? I don't know if you're familiar with that kind of thing. That I myself have seen it. So I'm just wondering, across the board and across the region, what are the experiences, so that we can learn from one another and try to see how we can improve our own system and our own structures.
So unlike the executive agencies, we don't say that the public bodies have delegated authority. They do have the authority to treat with their HR matters. However, there's still some communication and dialogue with the Ministry of Finance, particularly as it relates to getting the structures approved. So once the structures are approved, the salary scales are approved, they can hire and fire. There are some positions that will have to come to the post operations committee, am I getting that right? For them to, in order for them to be filled, but they do have much more latitude than the executive agencies.
So I'm thinking, Ona, that a lot may depend on the quality of the person who is actually recruited as the CEO.
Yes, you're right. Yes, that's very important. In terms of the EAs now and the function, I know the board is just advisory. Where would something like an audit committee come in?
Okay, well, they unlike public bodies, with audit committees are basically a subset of the board. The audit committees in the EAs are not selected in that manner. Audit committees in I said, they do have audit committees, as well as the central government entities, the ministries, so forth. And these audit committees, they are appointed by the cabinet secretary. We have a section in the ministry here called the Internal Audit Directorate that has a pool of candidates for these committees, and whenever the need arises, they pull from this pool, make recommendations to the cabinet secretary for appointment, and he does the appointment. And these audit committees, based on what the Act says, they are basically the CEO's audit committees. Yeah, they're CEO's audit committees. Yes, there's some level of independence, but they are there to enhance the whole accountability and governance structure of the entity, and this is also responsibility of the CEO.
Okay. All right. I just want to remind participants that the floor is open and we welcome your questions. While we wait on our participants, I just have one more question, and it's something that Cheryl said that really stuck with me and really struck me when you talked about the fact that you had a strong governance system and that you had a corporate governance framework and a code of ethics. And what I want to find out from you is how is that managed to ensure that this is not something that's just sitting there. You have a corporate governance framework, but how is it managed to make sure that it is enforced and is followed and it contributes to building that robust corporate governance framework that will take you forward?
Okay, so as it relates to the code of ethics, that was just recently issued.
Right.
Actually did a sensitization session just March gone. So that is gonna take some time before we can really and truly assess, but we depend a lot on the boards, especially the corporate secretaries, to ensure that these are followed, because the code has certain forms, especially for declaration of interest or conflict of interest. And so we are depending a lot on the corporate secretaries. So in sensitizing, we had focused quite a bit on the corporate secretaries and the ministry personnel. Now, as it relates to the corporate governance framework, as with any other policy document, we collaborate with the respective permanent secretaries of the various ministries to ensure, I know somebody who doesn't like when I say ensure, so I'll say facilitate, to facilitate adherence or compliance. And I think pretty much like maybe in England, we probably follow a comply or explain approach as it relates to the corporate governance framework. And therefore, for some aspects of it, especially like the corporate social responsibility, or where there are certain aspects of it where the annual reports are expected. The annual reports are expected to outline what are the activities that were pursued during the year. We also depend on another of the risk pillars, the Auditor General, who audits against I don't like to say stipulations, the recommendations of the corporate governance framework. So it's a collaborative approach. And of course, the Ministry of Finance and Public Service has responsibility, overarching responsibility for corporate governance. And so in order to ensure, to facilitate compliance, we work with, and we're trying to strengthen the relationships with not only the ministries, but especially the private sector organization of Jamaica. And as I said before, they keep us on our toes too. So it's not just a document. And oh, another thing, my unit actually goes out and we sensitize the public bodies as to the legislative and policy framework. So once a board is newly appointed, they may make requests for us to come in and sensitize the board. So it's a very live document, and the whole experience is a live experience. I can't tell you that we get to everybody, but at least once per year, we have a large session where we seek to engage not only the public bodies, but the ministries.
I like what I'm hearing, and I can see that you are making some efforts. One of the things that you said that I want to ask you about, I noticed that you kept saying corporate secretary and not board secretary. Now, I'm familiar with board secretary. So what I want to find out from you as part of your overall governance structure, whether there's a deliberate effort to recruit a corporate secretary as opposed to someone who performs the functions of a board secretary.
Well, yes, corporate secretary, we do make the effort to recommend, because what the nomenclature is corporate secretary is the functions that we find we try to expose. And so what we have realized, and I've listened to the presentations, and what we have realized is that the functions of the corporate secretary is evolving. It's evolving past minute taking, evolving, and it's ever evolving. And so they are expected to be the corporate governance gurus, right? And so we do promote corporate secretary. As a matter of fact, not only do we do that, we recommend that the person who is the corporate secretary does not hold the role of the legal officer of the entity. Of course, you can imagine sometimes the conflicts that can take place. So we are espousing or recommending, highly recommending corporate secretaries, right? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, nor am I seeing any hands raised, but I'm going to ask you if you want to give any last words or any thoughts that you think we can, anything else that you think we can, because I've taken away a lot, this has given me a lot of food for thought. So is there anything you want to add that you think could benefit us for in this session, as we are in our various jurisdictions, but we are learning from each other?
Well, as far as the implementation of the EA model is concerned, I would say it's a model worth pursuing. It's been our experience that it has led to real improvements in the level of efficiencies and deliverables of the entities. I must mention, the Kamala keeps on talking about RGD. I think RGD and Dr. Owens at times one of the showpieces, because when you think of what the RGD was before it became an executive agency, and what Dr. Owens left at, it's like cheese to chop. It's a vast improvement, and I have reservation, would recommend for any jurisdiction, if they want to go that route for certain entities, once they decide that they have seen the need for it, for a change, I would recommend going that route.
Anything from you, Cheryl?
good corporate governance is essential. It's vital. And one of the things that we have learned in Jamaica, that we have that if you have the tone being set at the top, it's important. And so we need to have the buy-in from those at the top. And one of the things I can say is that we certainly do have the buy-in from our minister here at the Ministry of Finance, and as a matter of fact, our cabinet, as it relates to enhanced corporate governance. We've seen over the years that it, the structure has led to improved operations among our public bodies in Jamaica. I can't say for all, I can't say all. There has been a level of control as it relates to borrowing, whereas before borrowing was, sometimes the government didn't have a handle on the borrowing that was taking place within public bodies. But because of the structure that is now in place, there is controlled borrowing. As a matter of fact, money is coming into the center because of the financial distribution regulations. As a matter of fact, some public bodies are also asked to give a special distribution if there is a windfall. And that's all part and parcel of the whole matter of the regulations that exist to guide that. There is more consistency, I think, as it relates to the governance of public bodies. I would say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one small step. And we continue to take these small steps with the hope of getting to New Zealand status or Australian status one day, and come along with us. And we are willing to share and willing to learn from you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing. I certainly, Kamala, have learned a whole lot, and I want to echo what you said. Good corporate governance is essential, and I'm glad that you were willing to share your experience. I think that we all can learn from you, and I too would like to see a strong, robust corporate governance framework here in Barbados. And I certainly am going to share some of what I heard today with my principals, because I do agree that it is important to get that buy-in at the top. And once you have that buy-in, then it makes the job a whole lot easier. So let me just say to you, congratulations on what you've been able to achieve so far. I wish you all the best as you go forward. And I hope that you will continue to have public bodies and executive agencies that exhibit the best corporate governance practices.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And I will turn the session back over to Kamala.